I decided to go with manager as a coach because it fit me the best out of all of them. I was a student athlete all throughout middle school and high school, and I've had a lot of coaches in my life. I myself am also in my third year of head coaching boys basketball at Mason Middle School. Um, and even though coaching a sport is very different from being a manager as a coach in the workplace, there's a lot of similarities between the two as well. And I've learned that the attributes and skills that I've developed as a coach have helped me in leadership positions that I've held in other places. And when thinking about pictures that describe this role, I think of pictures that describe some of the things that I do as a coach of basketball, but at the same time relate to being a manager as a coach in the workplace.
And one of the first images that came into my head when thinking about being a manager as a coach is an image of a ladder. A ladder is a symbolic image for reaching something. That something could be metaphorically goals. As a manager or in my position as a basketball coach, you want someone to help your workers, or in my case, players, reach their goals. Another image is the image of a new plant or a new tree because it says development to me. As a coach, you're technically planting the seed and helping it develop and grow, which is something I do all the time because as a coach, it's my duty to help them get better, to learn, and to grow as the season goes on. And it's not just to make them a better athlete. Coaching is also about helping them develop into young men as well. And even as a manager, you want to develop your employees to not only be hard workers, but you also need them to have great personalities and a great work ethic to make them be successful. And when you clarify these things and see them develop and watch it grow over time, it's one of the most rewarding things you can get as a coach. And along with the image of a new plant or tree, I can see how this next image can build off of that. When you plant something, you have to take care of it, because if you don't, what's it going to do? It's going to die eventually. Now, in the workplace and in the position that I currently hold as a coach, there's usually a fine line when it comes to nurturing the ones that you lead. There's a point where you would bring personal information, which is something that you don't really necessarily want to do. However, you still want to be able to nurture them as a manager and help as they grow and as they develop into the type of worker that you really want them to be. But you also have to really encourage them to be successful in doing that. And speaking of encouragement, it brings me to my next point. I definitely think it is key to being a manager as a coach that you're encouraging, which is why I think this next picture helps out a lot, because you see two climbers. One's obviously on the top, and the other one's working his way to get up there. But the one on the top is encouraging the other to make it up there with him. You definitely want encouragement like this, because if there is none, employees' efforts that you see may not be as effective. Encouragement can really maximize your employees, or in my case, players, as a coach. Even if mistakes are made, it is important to encourage that person to get them back up on their feet. If you want to get them better, encouragement plays an important role in doing that. If you do the opposite of that, you're only doing yourself, the people you're leading, harm, because they're not going to improve any. They're going to give up most likely. And then when I think of encouraging someone, I think of focusing on them. If you want to encourage someone, you really have to put your focus on them. And when I think of how managers do this to better their employees, it reminds me of a spotlight. You're putting the spotlight on that employee or that player. During one of the lectures we had about being a leader, manager as a coach, we reviewed some of the responses that a coach would say. We talked about checking in with your team or your workers. And this is something that I do with my team, and I think it's very effective. Sometimes if I notice a player who seems down, I'll sometimes just send them a quick text, checking in with them, make sure that everything is okay. And if there's a problem, that they'll hopefully tell me about it. We also discuss being present, and to be successful as a coach or a leader in any situation, you really need to give up focusing on yourself and directing that spotlight to other people. Because if you're focusing on yourself, you're not going to see what's happening around you. And just a simple change like focusing on your employees can help you have such an impact on motivation and results for your team or employees. And honesty is another key factor to be a good coach. It's simple as that. If you aren't honest in a coaching environment, whatever it may be, it's not going to do your team, your employees, it's not going to do yourself any good. It kind of reminds me of Pinocchio. He always found himself in trouble when he wasn't being honest, right? And as a coach, if I'm not honest with one of my players, then it's wrong of me to get upset when that player continues to do something wrong. If I'm not honest with my team, how can I expect as a coach for my players to improve? And now going back to encouragement, honesty and encouragement kind of tie hand in hand. Eighth graders don't really communicate, and they start to develop qualities that you see in adults, and I definitely see qualities in them that I see in myself. But as a coach, you have to be honest about their doings, but be encouraging at the same time. I see a lot of this in coaching basketball. If you tell a player that he's terrible at left-hand layups, he's not going to improve. However, if you tell him, hopefully in a nicer way, and show him and teach him how to get better, you'll probably see improvement over time. The same scenario applies with a manager in a workplace, but with different problems and distractions. Another important quality to have as a coach or as a leader is trust. As a leader, you can't do everything. You could do everything, but it's not going to be done the right way. If that was the case, there would be no need for a manager to have employees in general. Good leaders are the ones who realize that they are not the right person for every job, and that they can delegate those tasks and duties to employees that they trust. Today, you see many leaders try to do all things at once and do a subpar job. The ones that succeed are the ones who trust their employees or their team or the person that they're mentoring, whatever the case may be. And that's definitely a great quality to have in any type of environment. In one of the readings for this chapter, The Practices of Effective Managerial Coaches, it says this: a senior manager should have every incentive to be an effective coach, as both subordinate and superior can benefit from increased high performance. When the junior manager does well, it should make the senior manager's job and life at work easier. In the contents of a mutually beneficial relationship, mistakes and performance shortcomings are opportunities to teach more effective behaviors to junior managers. This time investment in coaching will be rewarded in improved performance, which allows the superior to devote less time to monitoring and more time to the specific challenges they face as a senior manager. Managers emphasize that the climate of openness and trust is vital to a successful coaching relationship. Alternatively, a superior subordinate a problem, resolve a conflict, and or remove a performance barrier. I think this picture definitely describes trust perfectly. You obviously have the woman who is trusting the man to catch her, even though it kind of looks like the man might not catch her. We're just going to trust that he actually does, in the end up catching her. Something else that I think is absent from most managers today is that mentor style of working with your employees. This definitely ties along with developing and nurturing the ones that you're leading, but I think a great leader mentors the ones that work for them. One thing I always think of as a coach is being, the sensei to my players. Sometimes I even joke around with them and call them grasshopper. But I definitely try to coach in that way. Yes, I want to teach them the game of basketball, but I also want to mentor them and set a great example and help them become better on and off the court. I have a mentor myself, and he does the same. He sets examples. He helps me with obstacles that come up in life. He guides me to living the best possible way that I can. And I definitely think that's a relationship that managers should have to an extent with their employees. I also think that if you're going to be that coach type of manager, you have to have respect. I mean, you should already have respect no matter in what you're doing, but we saw this in the Hoosiers clip. Coach Dale was a very respectful man. He taught his players respect. He even taught the community respect. And in a work environment, you want your employees and the ones underneath you to respect you. And a way of doing that is to respect them. It definitely goes hand in hand. One thing I stress as a coach is respect, and it's not just to me, but also to the teammates, the teachers within the school, their parents, and basically anyone around them. I've dealt with players who don't get along with each other, and it just creates a negative environment to the whole team. And I definitely think that applies to the workplace as well. You definitely want to have a positive environment to be successful. Overall, though, I think the most important trait to have as a coach is leadership. Instead of a picture, I used a clip from the movie Braveheart, as I'm sure you know, and it's the famous freedom speech scene. And this scene is where you see the most leadership out of the whole movie, in my opinion. And I think it's the most important trait to have as a coach because coaches are leaders. It's simple. If you don't have leadership, you aren't really a coach. And in this scene, you see all the traits that we've already talked about. You see encouragement, respect, trust, and a lot more traits. And these traits help William Wallace get the results he wanted from his army. He was a great leader and he was a great coach. And with this, you need to be able to have a great organizational sense as well. You have to be able to break things down. You have to be able to find out skills and use your team or employees for what they do best to help contribute to the goal as a whole. Obviously there's a lot more to being a leader, manager as a coach, but I think the traits that I had talked about describe what it's like, as well as what it takes to be a good coach, whether in sports, work, or even in life in general.